Thank you for joining us on Did You Know That? We've been talking about angels in heaven, and now it's really more of a case of angels on earth. But this is Jerry, and I think we're going to be having a good talk. We saw how Lucifer, who is a very prized, probably the most important angel, fell, took a third of the angels with him, and changed the landscape of heaven. Now we saw how he deceived Adam and Eve, changed mankind forever. Then we get down to Cain and Abel, and we saw that Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve, that for whatever reason, Cain killed Abel. And because of this, Cain was going to be a vagabond for the rest of his life. The Lord put a mark on him so that nobody else would kill him, but his crops weren't going to grow for him anymore. He's no longer going to be a farmer, and he was going to wander the earth. Well, Genesis 4:25 tells us this. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And like I said before, Cain and Abel aren't mentioned in the official genealogy now of Adam. Well, things cooked along for about 4 generations after Seth was born, and with people living over 900 years, a generation can be pretty long. But they had lots of children. Like I said in one of the last ones, it's said that Adam and Eve had at least 45 children, and if each one of these people had 45 children, you can see how cities could grow really fast. And so they did, and a population explosion was going on. Now, in Perry Stone's DVD, The Noah Code, he said that it's estimated that 5 to 10 billion people lived on Earth before the flood. So I checked Google, and they said that it was 7.53. So you can see we're 7.53 billion. So you could see that we're right in there as far as the population numbers. That's what we've got on Earth today. So we come to a man named Enoch, and he was the great-grandfather of Noah. And all these people were descendants of Seth. And things began to change. But Enoch was special. He never died, but he only lived 365 years on earth. Well, how could that be? Well, Genesis 5:23 tells us this. And all the days of Enoch were 365. And interestingly, that's how many days we have in a year. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And that means God took him while he was alive to heaven. We saw the same thing happen with Elijah. Elijah was walking along with Elisha, and a chariot of fire came and took him. He did not die. So in the Bible, we have these two people who do not die. But Hebrew 11:5 says things just a little bit differently. It says, by faith Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased God. And so not only did he not die, the first time he went to heaven, he stayed there for a while, and God showed him the mysteries of creation, what's going to happen to the righteous and the wicked, the second coming of Christ, the tribulation, and things that were going to happen on the earth, what's going to happen to the sun, moon, and the stars, and many, many other things. The book of Enoch is a very interesting read, and if you haven't read it, you should give it a try, because it tells a lot of things that we wonder about. And the people in the New Testament, they even wrote about Enoch and the things that he said, because at that period of time, there was a book that was passed around that apparently everybody was familiar with, and they quoted from it because it was accepted. But there were some big events, as as President Trump would say, they're huge, that were going to happen. And Enoch was to return to earth and tell his family, which he did. And so all of civilization was warned of some very fearful things that was going to happen. Uh, they already knew because from the time of Adam and Eve, they knew that the earth was going to be destroyed twice, once by water, once by fire. But they didn't know which order that was going to come in. But they were very familiar with that information, and it had been passed on since the time of Adam and Eve. But ultimately, uh, Methuselah, who was Enoch's son, and Methuselah had Lamech, and Lamech had Noah. And when Noah came along, that's when things really began to fall apart. So we can be sure that all this information was passed on down to Noah, who passed it down to his children, uh, especially the part about that the earth was going to be destroyed 2 times. So when God told Noah to build the ark, he was ready. In Genesis 6, 1 through 4, in the King James Version, and I'll always be reading from the King James Version, it says this: "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all they chose." Now we know that the scriptures say there's no marriage and giving of marriage in heaven. But we're not in heaven here. We're on earth, and this is where this occurred. So apparently angels have the ability to morph into the form of people. I don't think that all angels look like people, but apparently they have this ability, because all through the Bible we read of these people who show up looking like captains and different things. And so that's something we'll have to ask God about. But in verse 3 of chapter 6 of Genesis, it says, "And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also his flesh. Yet his days shall be no more than 120 years. Now that's down from 900. That's a big drop. But you see, by that time, they had not eaten from the tree of life for a long time. None of Adam and Eve's descendants ate from the tree of life. But imagine how nourishing that was, because all that nourishment passed down, passed down, passed down. But I'm sure by this time that it was a lot of weaker strain, because they had not been eating from it. Verse 4 says, "There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God, fallen angels, came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown." Now these stories have all gotten into Greek mythology and mythology around the world, and some of the stories have been changed around. But there were giants, and some of them, if not all, were reported in the mythological line. The book of Enoch tells us that 200 angels, now this is not part of the 1/3 of the angels that fell with Lucifer, now known as Satan. These were 200 angels who descended. If they had been the ones that were on the earth, they said they went up to it, but these descended. And they bound themselves with an oath, and they defiled themselves with the beautiful daughters of men spoken of in Genesis 6, 1 through 4. Then they taught the women all manner of crafts. Now, let me tell you something. YouTube would almost fall apart if you took away all the craft classes. And I love crafts. I work in crafts all the time, but this says that the fallen angels taught them crafts and enchantments, and they taught the men the ways of war. When the children of the angels were born, they were giants, and the earth could not sustain them. They ate all manner of flesh. That's all the animals on the land, fish, birds, and it goes on to say that they drank the blood. Now, drinking the blood of any animal is a no-no. But then the giants turned against mankind and they started devouring and eating them. So, once again, Satan and renegade angels had changed the course of the world, and once again, God's creation had been defiled. And now the Bible bears out stories of angels before and after the flood. Before the flood, the giants were the result of fallen angels mating with women of mankind. After the flood, the giants, we can trace them back to the line of Ham. If you go through the Bible, you can find these, and we'll get into that later. But I'll just give you an example of one king. That was King Og of Bashan. And in Deuteronomy 3:11, we read about him. For only Og of Bashan remained of the remnant of giants. Now this was after the flood. And behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits. Now, a cubit is measured from the tip of the elbow to the tip of the middle finger. So, how long a cubit is can vary. It just depends on whose arm you're measuring. But roughly, a cubit is 18 inches. That's 1.5 feet. So you can see that it was, you can see that's what it was, that there's different kinds. Numbers 32:33 tells us that Og was an Amorite king. And if you trace the Amorites back, you find they come from Canaan, who was the son of Cush, who was the son of Ham, who was the son of Noah. And that's how you can trace all these things back. Conceivably, the giants were thought of as being giants just because they were so much taller. They looked very tall. The average Hebrew is between 5'6" and 5'10", but in 1 Samuel 9:2, Saul, who was the first king of Israel, was described as being from his shoulders upward. He was higher than any of the people, and so he could have been anywhere from 6 to 7 feet tall, which is quite tall. Now, I'm 5'1/2". That's not very tall. My daughters are 5'9.5", and one of my sons-in-law is 6'4". There's a vast difference in where we put things. And if I'm looking for something and I can't find it, they'll say, well, it's on the shelf. Did you look on the shelf? Yeah, I looked on the shelf. I'll go look again. No, it's not on the shelf. I couldn't find it. Well, okay. So they come in. It was on the top shelf. Now, the top shelf is not only out of my range of reach. It's out of my eyesight. I can't even see that thing. So being high can be a very relative thing. Just depends on where you are in your statures. Well, I've run out of time. Next time we're going to start with Numbers 13, 1 through 33, and we're going to talk about the 12 spies that were sent into the promised land and see what happens there. But I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done that. God bless you, and we'll see you the next time. Bye now.